It's funny how packing a suitcase can make everything feel like it's about to change. I stood in my bedroom, shoving socks into corners and pretending I wasn't overthinking a 3-day cabin trip with my best friend, Ryan. I told myself it was just a break from the city, a chance to breathe after months of burnout, deadlines, and passive-aggressively worded emails. But underneath that excuse was a tug in my chest I'd stopped trying to name a long time ago. Ryan had suggested the getaway weeks ago, just the two of us. No cell service, no noise, just pine trees, quiet, and beer. He even joked about calling it our honeymoon, since I'd been ducking out of dates lately and he'd been single since God knows when. I laughed then. I always laughed when Ryan joked like that, like it didn't send a flicker of heat right through my ribs. He's been my best friend since college. The kind of guy who could turn a grocery run into an adventure, who remembered the name of my childhood dog after I mentioned it once. We'd shared hangovers, heartbreaks, and the occasional sleeping bag on late-night camping trips. It was always easy with him, dangerously easy. But lately, there was something different. Not in him, not exactly. It was me. The way I started noticing the slope of his shoulders when he reached for something on a high shelf. The way my breath caught when he laughed and looked at me like I was the funniest person alive. The way his hand would rest on the back of my neck just a second longer than necessary, and I'd pretend not to notice. God, I noticed. Now we were heading to a secluded cabin up north, one he found on some obscure website. He claimed the best part was the wood-burning stove and authentic lack of internet. I could already hear him, "No distractions, man. Just you, me, and our fake marriage license." He had a way of teasing that always towed the line between harmless and heart-aching. I zipped the suitcase shut and glanced out the window, the afternoon sun streaking gold across the sidewalk. In a few hours, Ryan would be at my door, grinning with that lopsided smile and probably wearing that awful denim jacket he swore was vintage. And I'd do what I always did, shrug off my feelings, pack them between my folded shirts, and pretend that 3 days alone with him wouldn't make them worse. But something about this trip felt different. And part of me didn't want to pretend anymore. Ryan picked me up in his beat-up Jeep, music blasting something indie and obscure, his specialty. He leaned out the window with a grin like he hadn't just seen me yesterday. "Did you bring your vows, or are we winging it like last time?" he called. I rolled my eyes as I tossed my bag in the back. "You said one joke about us being married and now it's a whole bit." He shrugged. "Can't help it. You make a beautiful husband." The words were casual, like everything he said, but they sat warm against my skin. I turned toward the passenger seat before he could see the smile I failed to suppress. We'd been close since sophomore year of college, bonded over terrible coffee, worse professors, and the shared understanding that we didn't quite fit the mold everyone else seemed to settle into so easily. Ryan was the kind of guy who'd skip class to take a road trip to the coast because the ocean's calling, and I was the idiot who went with him every single time. Somewhere along the way, our friendship became a sort of home. We moved to the city after graduation, ended up in apartments 2 blocks apart, and saw each other more than we saw our own families. There was never a label, never a conversation. Just the steady presence of him. His voice on the phone at midnight, his hoodie on my couch, his toothbrush somehow living in my bathroom without anyone ever asking why. The drive up to the cabin was full of our usual chaos. Ryan argued with the GPS, I controlled the playlist, and we both stopped for gas station snacks like we were 12 again. It wasn't until the sun started dipping behind the trees that something started to settle in my chest, something heavy and quiet. The cabin was small and rustic, perched on the edge of a lake that reflected the dimming sky. When we stepped inside, I noticed the fireplace, the faint scent of cedar, and exactly one bed. I stared. Ryan, behind me, let out a low whistle. Cozy. Romantic. Exactly what we need to rekindle the flame. Please tell me there's a couch. He dropped his bag beside mine. Nope. Just the marital bed. I shot him a look, but he was already moving toward the window, opening it to let in the cool evening air. I could feel heat creeping up the back of my neck. I didn't trust myself in small spaces lately, not with him. Especially not when he stretched like that, arms over his head, shirt riding up just enough to reveal the curve of his lower back. I turned away too fast. "I'll take the floor," I muttered. He glanced back, eyebrows raised. What, you don't want to cuddle with your husband? I threw a granola bar at his head. He caught it midair, laughing, and I hated that I loved how easy this was. Always had been. Later, we sat on the porch drinking beers, legs stretched out, watching the lake go dark. The stars blinked into view one by one, and for a while, we didn't speak. You remember that time in Portland? He asked suddenly. I smiled. When we accidentally booked a room with one bed and pretended to be newlyweds for the hotel discount? He nodded, grinning into his bottle. We were pretty convincing. You kissed me on the cheek. Had to sell it, he said, voice quieter now. Something in the air shifted. I could feel it, like the way clouds build before rain. He looked at me then, really looked. Not laughing. Not joking. I looked away first. Inside, we set up the bedding situation. I grabbed the folded blankets from the closet and laid them out on the hardwood floor beside the bed. Ryan raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. As I turned off the light, he murmured, You know, I wouldn't mind if you changed your mind. About what? The bed, he said, voice low. You never let yourself get comfortable. I lay there in the dark, the sound of his breathing inches from me, my heart knocking too loud in my chest. He didn't know how right he was. The rain started sometime around midnight. At first, it was a soft pattering on the cabin roof, almost comforting. But it grew steadily louder, heavier, until wind howled through the cracks of the wooden frame and the distant crash of thunder rolled in from over the lake. I woke to the sound of water dripping. Blinking in the darkness, I turned my head. The soft glow from Ryan's phone screen lit up the room. He was sitting on the bed, shirtless, brows furrowed. What's wrong? I asked, my voice gravel-thick with sleep. He looked over. Ceiling's leaking. Right above you. I sat up, and sure enough, a steady drip was landing a foot from my pillow. I muttered a curse and sat up, running a hand through my hair. Guess the honeymoon suite's got a skylight now. Ryan smirked, but his eyes softened. Get up here. Floor's gonna be soaked in 5. I hesitated. My mouth opened, closed. He watched me, waiting. Ryan. Come on, he said, shifting over, lifting the blanket like it was no big deal. I'm not gonna grope you in your sleep. That earned a weak laugh from me, but I didn't move. It wasn't about the bed. Not really. It was the knowledge that I wouldn't sleep, not with the warmth of him beside me, the way he moved in his sleep, the scent of his shampoo that still clung to the pillow we'd shared on road trips. It was the fear that if I let myself be close, I wouldn't want to pull away. But the drip was getting louder. The floor was damp. Fine, I muttered, crawling into the bed as if it weren't the worst idea I'd ever agreed to. The mattress dipped beneath my weight. Ryan rolled onto his side to give me space, but even that small movement made the blanket pull tight across both of us. My arm brushed his. His skin was warm. My heart was anything but calm. We lay there in silence, thunder cracking in the distance, the rain turning into a roar above us. You okay? He asked, his voice barely audible. Yeah. He shifted closer, just slightly, like it was natural. Like he didn't feel the entire room tilting sideways. The heat between us felt impossible to ignore. My mind kept circling the space where our arms touched, that 1 inch of skin searing like it meant something. I remember the first time we shared a bed, he said suddenly. I swallowed. You mean that ski trip junior year? You had cold feet, he chuckled. Literally. You shoved them against my legs and I nearly jumped out the window. I laughed too, but it felt strange, tight in my chest. You told me you liked it. Said it was like being hugged by a corpse. I did say that. The pause. Then quieter, you still do that, you know. Do what? Freeze up when we get too close. I turned my head, surprised to find him watching me in the dark. His eyes searched mine, soft and unreadable. You always laugh off the jokes, he said. Push it all away like you're scared of something. I opened my mouth to reply, but nothing came. My throat closed around the words. He wasn't wrong. I had built a fortress of sarcasm and half-smiles around the truth for years. I'd convinced myself that as long as he didn't know, I could keep him. That my feelings wouldn't ruin what we had. But lying next to him now, the weight of the storm pressing in, I wasn't sure I could pretend much longer. "Ryan," I said quietly, and he turned toward me, his breath catching slightly. I didn't say what I was thinking, that every moment like this made it harder to lie. That I wanted things I had no right to want. Instead I asked, "Why'd you invite just me this weekend?" He blinked. "What do you mean? You could have brought a group. Made it a party. But you didn't." He was quiet for a beat too long. Then he said, "Because I wanted to be with you." Just that. No punchline. No teasing. Something cracked inside me. The air between us was heavy, dense with unsaid things. My hand twitched, tempted to reach for his. I didn't. Instead I asked, "You ever think about us? Like, differently?" His breath hitched. "All the time," he said. The words hung there, echoing. I turned fully toward him, heart thudding painfully. He didn't look away. His hand moved slowly, hesitating, then gently settled on my waist under the blanket. Barely there. A suggestion, not a promise. "I didn't think you ever would," he said. "Would what?" "Ask." He was so close. His lips a whisper away. My heart screamed at me to close the gap. But I stayed still, afraid that one movement would shatter the moment, or solidify it forever. I didn't know which scared me more. But Ryan just looked at me with that same quiet patience he always had, and for the first time, I let myself look back without running. "Ryan," I whispered. He didn't move, didn't rush. "I'm scared," I admitted. "I know," he said. "Me too." And then, so slowly I almost didn't realize it was happening, he leaned in and pressed his forehead to mine. No kiss. No grand gesture. Just closeness. Real, undeniable, terrifying closeness. And it was more intimate than anything I'd ever known. We didn't fall asleep that night. Maybe we both pretended for a while, eyes closed, breathing slowed, like we could hide from the way everything had shifted, but there was no going back. Not after those words. Not after all the time. The storm passed sometime near dawn. The silence it left behind was almost louder, like the world had paused to wait for us. Ryan stirred first, his forehead no longer against mine but close enough that I could feel the heat of him. I stayed still, afraid to break whatever fragile understanding had formed in the dark. But he moved anyway, slowly, carefully, sitting up with the blanket pooling around his waist. His bare back was to me, the soft morning light outlining the curve of his shoulder blades, the dip of his spine. "Couldn't sleep?" I asked, voice low. He looked back over his shoulder, eyes a little tired but clear. "Didn't want to." I sat up too, drawing my knees to my chest. There were so many things I could have said, but they all got stuck somewhere between my chest and my throat. Ryan rubbed the back of his neck. "What happens now?" The question felt too big for the room. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I've been trying not to think about it." He smiled faintly. "You've been doing that for years." I let out a breathy laugh. "Yeah." He turned toward me then, legs crossed, his hands resting between his knees like he was grounding himself. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Of course." He looked at me, really looked, and for once there was no teasing in his eyes. No safety net. "Was I imagining it?" he asked quietly. "All this time?" "No," I said, too fast, too certain. "You weren't." He nodded slowly, as if confirming something to himself. "Okay," he whispered. Silence stretched again. I tried to find the words, the right ones, but what came out was clumsy and too honest. "I didn't think I was allowed to want you," I said. "Not like that." Ryan tilted his head. "Why not?" "Because I didn't want to lose what we already had. Because I figured if I kept it to myself, at least I'd still have you." I paused. I thought if I said something, it might ruin everything. He looked at me for a long time. Then he asked, "Do you remember last New Year's?" I blinked. "The party?" "No. After. When we went back to your place and you fell asleep on the couch?" I nodded slowly. "Yeah. I almost kissed you," he said. My heart stopped. "You were asleep," he added quickly, like it mattered. "And I didn't. Obviously. But I wanted to. God, I wanted to." My breath caught in my chest. Why didn't you? I asked. He gave a sad, crooked smile. Because I figured if I kissed you and you didn't want it, that would be it. Game over. And I didn't want to watch you look at me differently. We both laughed, soft, a little broken, because we were idiots. I thought I was hiding it so well, I murmured. You weren't. My head snapped up. He grinned. I mean, come on, he said. You blushed every time I touched your arm. You'd go completely still when I got too close. You were so obvious, it was kind of adorable. I groaned, hiding my face in my hands. Jesus. He leaned in. But you never pulled away. I looked at him, hands falling into my lap. Because I didn't want to. He reached forward then, slow and deliberate, and placed his hand over mine. His thumb brushed the side of my knuckle, a barely there touch that still made my pulse jump. I kept waiting for you to be ready, he said. And I told myself I could live with that. Just being your friend. But you didn't want to, I whispered. No, he said. I wanted more. I still want more. I stared at his hand on mine, then at his face, then back down again. What if we mess it up? I asked. He gave a half smile. What if we don't? It was too much. It wasn't enough. I leaned forward before I could stop myself, my heart hammering in my throat. His eyes flicked to my lips, and I saw the exact moment he realized what I was about to do. He met me halfway. The kiss was gentle, hesitant, like the first step out onto a frozen lake, unsure if it would hold. But God, it did. His lips were soft, warm, familiar in a way that made something inside me splinter open. There was no desperation, no firestorm. Just the slow, steady ache of something earned. When we pulled apart, our foreheads pressed together again, both of us breathing like we just surfaced from underwater. I've wanted that for so long, I admitted. He laughed under his breath. Me too. There was so much more to say. But for now, that was enough. He lay back on the bed and tugged me down with him, arms wrapping around my waist like he'd done it 1,000 times. Maybe he had. In dreams. In half-sleep. In ways neither of us had let ourselves notice until now. I'm still scared, I said into the quiet. Me too, he replied. But not enough to walk away. We stayed like that for a while. Just breathing. Just being. And when I finally closed my eyes, I didn't pretend to sleep. I was home. And he was right there with me. Waking up next to Ryan was strange. Not in a bad way. More like the world had rotated slightly in the night, just enough that everything familiar felt quietly new. His arm was still draped across my waist, his hand warm against my stomach. And my head was on his chest, right over his heartbeat, steady and grounding. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was pretending. Morning, Ryan murmured, his voice thick with sleep. Morning, I whispered back, trying not to smile too much. But he saw it anyway. He shifted beneath me, tilting his head to look down. You always smile like that when you're about to say something ridiculous. I wasn't going to say anything. Liar. I laughed and let my hand rest lightly on his chest. I was just thinking, you drool when you sleep. He groaned and covered his face with his free hand. We're not even an hour into being official and you're already dragging me? I've been holding that in for years, man. You have no idea. He laughed, deep, unguarded, and completely beautiful. You're lucky I like you, he said. I lifted my head slightly, looking at him. You like me? I asked, mock offended. After everything we shared last night? That's all I get. Would love be better? He said easily, brushing a thumb over my cheekbone. The playfulness died a little in his expression. The moment softened. Because I do, he said quietly. I love you. The words sank in slow, like sunlight on skin. I swallowed around the sudden lump in my throat. Yeah. He nodded. I think I've loved you for a while. Just didn't know what to do with it. I kissed him again, quick, clumsy, smiling halfway through. Oh, you're doing great so far. He grinned. So what happens now? We lay back side by side again, facing the ceiling like it held the answers. I don't know, I said. But I know I don't want to go back to pretending. Same. There was a pause. People are going to ask questions when we get home, I said. Our friends. My sister. That guy at work who thinks we're already married. Ryan chuckled. Let him be right for once. I turned my head to look at him. You ready for that? I don't think I've ever been ready for anything in my life, he said honestly. But if it means waking up with you, dealing with awkward questions, figuring out how this all works, then yeah. I want it. My chest tightened in the best possible way. Besides, he added with a smirk, I make an excellent fake wife. You said so yourself. Oh my God, I groaned, burying my face in his pillow. Don't bring that up again. He laughed. Never letting it go. I've got the voice, the hips, the sass. I take it back. I'm reconsidering this relationship. Too late. He leaned over and kissed the back of my neck, and suddenly I wasn't joking anymore. There was something terrifying about being seen. About being known. But with Ryan, it felt less like exposure and more like coming into the light. We stayed in bed longer than we should have. Eventually, we'd have to pack up, head home, face whatever came next. But for now, it was just the two of us. Soft breaths. Shared laughter. The promise of something more. You know this is just the beginning, right? I asked, brushing my fingers through his hair. Good, he said. I like beginnings with you. And I believed him. Because this time, we weren't faking anything. A week later, I found Ryan in my kitchen, barefoot, wearing one of my old hoodies like it belonged to him. Which, let's face it, it basically did. The sleeves were pushed up to his elbows, and he was stirring something in a pan that smelled suspiciously like burnt eggs. I leaned against the doorway, just watching him, my heart doing that annoying fluttery thing it did now whenever he was near. He glanced over his shoulder. I can feel you judging me. I'm not judging, I said, walking in. I'm just quietly documenting the crime scene for when the fire department shows up. He snorted and bumped me with his hip as I passed. Rude. I stole a piece of toast off the counter and bit into it. Delicious, I said with a straight face. You're the worst. And you're the guy who lit my kitchen on fire with a frying pan. He gave me a look. This is how you're treating your husband? I choked on my toast. We are not. Legally, no, he said, too casually. Emotionally? Morally? Spiritually? He waved his spatula. Basically already married. You're so annoying. You love me. Unfortunately, he was right. I took the spatula from his hand and turned the burner off, then gently pushed the pan aside. The eggs were ruined, but honestly, it didn't matter. I stepped in closer, wrapping my arms around his waist. Yeah, I said into his chest. I really do. He hugged me back immediately, tightly, like he still couldn't quite believe this was real. Like we might blink and go back to before. But we wouldn't. We weren't those versions of ourselves anymore. After a while, he murmured, Your sister texted me last night. I pulled back slightly. Wait, my sister? Why? She said I better not break your heart, or she'll castrate me with her eyelash curler. I laughed. That sounds like her. She also said she knew. Apparently, she's known since like sophomore year. I blinked. Wait, she knew? I didn't even know. He kissed my forehead. You're not that subtle, babe. Don't call me babe while standing next to incinerated eggs. He laughed, kissed me again. This time on the mouth, lingering and warm. It was a good kiss. Not rushed. Not dramatic. Just easy. Comfortable. Ours. Later, we ended up on the couch, wrapped in a blanket. The dog Ryan was just dog-sitting curled up at our feet like he'd moved in too. We watched some terrible home renovation show neither of us cared about and didn't talk much, and somehow it was one of the best afternoons of my life. At some point, Ryan said, I was thinking, we should take that road trip we talked about. I turned my head toward him. The Pacific Coast one? Yeah. Just you and me. No timeline, no plan. Just go. See what happens. I smiled. I'd like that. He nodded, and we lapsed back into silence. But the thought lingered between us, quiet and hopeful. This wasn't a grand romantic gesture. There were no fireworks, no dramatic declarations in the rain. It was just two idiots who'd spent too long pretending, finally figuring it out. And now? Now we had time. He nudged my leg gently. Hey, remember that lake house trip? When you made me fake marry you? Technically you offered. Right. I was so convincing. Nailed the husband act. I rolled my eyes. You were pretty good. He looked at me then, soft and steady. Think I could try again? For real this time? I didn't answer right away. I reached over, took his hand in mine, and interlaced our fingers. Then I rested my head on his shoulder. Let's start with the road trip, I said, my voice low. Ryan smiled. Fair enough. We didn't need vows or rings or ceremonies just yet. We had something better, a beginning we chose. And as the sky outside shifted into gold, and the dogs snored between us, I realized something simple and undeniable. This time, we were writing our story together. And it was only just getting started.